Frank Ocean is a once-in-a-lifetime artist who became a living legend off the strength of just 2 albums, technically 4. What I'm trying to say is that people love Frank Ocean so much that everything he's ever done, of which there is honestly very little, is basically revered as surreal and larger than life. The respect we have for Frank Ocean's music feels like the irrational rush of a dream. The small handful of songs he does have become larger than life, while Frank himself remains deeply shrouded in mystery. He is flat out the most beloved artist alive today. But in the 6 years since his last record, my own associations with the music itself have come to feel the same way, like a dream I can hardly remember. As the point in my life when Frank Ocean's music was most important to me becomes a more distant memory, I find myself asking, will it hit the same next time around? Have I aged out of the feelings of forlorn love and longing and dreamy aimlessness that defines Frank's work? But what matters even more than that is, where is Frank Ocean anyway? This video about Frank Ocean is made possible by CuriosityStream and Nebula, the only place where you can watch my exclusive full-length series looking at the story behind and the making of albums like Whole Lotta Red and Call Me If You Get Lost. You can get Nebula for less than $15 a year through our sponsor CuriosityStream at curiositystream.com/Volksy. More on that later. Over the last 6 years, Blonde became more than an album. It's one of the major icons of our generation in the purest sense of the word. It isn't just beautiful. It's beautiful music to the point where millions of people found themselves deeply bonded to the album. Despite the way its lyrics are cryptic and abstract at the same time, there are so many people that feel like the music is deeply personal to them. Blonde seems to be a story about forgiveness and acceptance. And that's why when you ask people what they think about it, the response could be anywhere between, oh yeah, I love that album, to I literally love that album so much I feel like my heart is getting ripped out of my chest every time I hear the intro to Nikes. Blonde feels like growing up. It feels like the first time you catch feelings for someone, but instead of the childhood infatuation, you start to understand who they are. And for the first time, you realize that you may be better off without someone in your life. It tells a story about the way that the feeling and experience of love is inseparable from pain. That's why so many people see it as beautiful and sad at the same time. It's an album that didn't even really make sense at first. When we first heard it 6 years ago, we were asking, it sounds amazing, but what is this album really about? The songwriting is clearly deeply personal, but it's not like you know what he's really singing about. But as the years went on, as I went from 16 to 22 years old, I eventually figured out that in order to feel love at all, I first have to accept the pain and loss that always comes with it. I sit back now and listen to Blonde, and I realize what a genius album it always was. Listening to what I think is one of the most beautiful albums I've ever heard, one of the most amazing works of music ever made, and realizing that it's not actually an album about love, but an album about the feelings that come after love. It reminds me that no matter how strongly we may feel, love itself cannot exist without loss. If you don't feel sad when your loved one is gone, did you ever love them at all? That's why, if you ask someone, why is Blonde your favorite album? They aren't going to say XYZ, this song, that feature, that instrumental. They're going to say, when I was down and I felt terrible, this album helped me feel better. It's one of the most unique masterpieces of the last 10 years. There's more love for this record than almost any other piece of music I can think of. People love Blonde for the way it gets into your life and you start to form memories around it. Its artistic impact surpasses music and enters the surreal realm of memory and psyche. When you think of Blonde, you don't just think of a collection of 17 beautiful R&B songs. You think of that period in your life when it was all you could listen to after losing a girlfriend, or the time you moved to a new city by yourself and had no friends, and the way that Blonde could be your only source of comfort and clarity in a world that made no sense. That's why it's one of the best albums ever made. But it's been 6 years since Blonde. I was 16, 17, 18. I was unconfident, small, shy, lost, and confused. I was 19, 20, 21, more sure of myself, but still irrational and emotional and unstable. I'm 22 now, and I'm still listening to Blonde. But when I listen to it, I no longer think about the way it helped me through my struggles, but instead I start to think about how far I am from being that person anymore. It's taken on a new meaning for me, but more than anything, Blonde now feels like it comes from a different era. I am unrecognizably different from who I was in 2016, and so is the rest of the world. In that way, Blonde is no longer just a beautiful album. It's a bittersweet window into a world that no longer exists. It shows me a version of myself that no longer exists. In Blonde's timelessness, there lies a picture of the past. And that past reminds me that all of my sadness will eventually crystallize into an overwhelming gratitude for the gift of life itself. The fact that we are here at all is a miracle, and the fact that we get to experience love is more than enough for me to accept the pain and loss that always follows behind. Even when things don't work out, life is still beautiful. and it always will be. But where exactly has Frank Ocean been since dropping the album of a lifetime in 2016? What has he been up to? He's actually dropped almost an album's worth of songs since 2016. Starting with Chanel in 2017 and going through 2020, Frank dropped songs like Biking, Lens, Provider, Moon River, DHL, In My Room, and Dear April and Cayendo. 8 singles in 5 years, without even a mention of an album. You can break down the singles into 3 different groups. The post-blonde singles that basically feel like B-sides or loosies that were left off the project, the more electronic, groovy dance-inspired songs, and the slow, emotional acoustic ballads, Cayendo and Dear April. There really isn't a common thread between the different sets of tracks Frank has dropped in the last 5 years. The first few sound a lot like Blonde, but less conceptual, more like singles. The second set of singles from 2019 are my favorites, based heavily on synthy, electronic loops in a way that felt fresh from Frank, and the 2020 singles Dear April and Cayendo are some of Frank's most melancholic tracks yet, featuring one of my favorite producers, Daniel Aged, with an overall ambient-sounding instrumental with synthy washes of sound and jazzy guitars. These tracks are low-key and quiet, probably the quietest songs Frank Ocean has made, but at the same time they do have the feeling of longing and melancholy that you hear throughout Blonde. There are even more tracks that never made it to streaming. Little Demon is a beautiful dance track featuring Skepta that you can only hear as a shitty re-upload on YouTube. Unfortunately, the vinyl release of this song was cancelled in 2020 and never replaced with anything else. It's a dark electronic track featuring chopped up, distorted, pitch-shifted vocals from Frank and Skepta on top of hard-hitting bass and drums. It's by far one of Frank's hardest, most synthetic, chaotic songs, and it feels like a real evolution in his sound, but it never came out. It's impossible to say if these singles were meant to be part of albums that never ended up being finished, or if it's just Frank experimenting with different sounds in a casual way, but each time he comes out with a new wave of songs, it's like the hype train starts up in a new direction. Is Frank making a Spanish language acoustic project? Is he making a groovy dance project? But then years go by and we realize there was no project at all. Music isn't the only thing Frank has been up to since Blonde either. Actually, the biggest project he's worked on in the past 6 years is his jewelry brand, Homer. Homer was officially launched in 2021 with a retail store in New York and an online shop featuring high-end jewelry made in Italy with lab-grown diamonds, recycled sterling silver, 18-karat gold, and hand-painted enamel. Most of the pieces on the online shop are consistently sold out with prices ranging from $250 for a scarf and $400 for small 925 silver pendants to a $1.9 million diamond necklace worn by Drake at an NBA game in Toronto. Unfortunately, you can't tell the story of Frank Ocean's career post-Blonde without mentioning the heartbreaking passing of his brother in the summer of 2020. Shortly after Cayendo and Dear April, Frank's brother was involved in a fatal car crash in Thousand Oaks, California. It was such a painful tragedy that most people agreed it wouldn't be a surprise if Frank, who was already reclusive and private to begin with, were to never release music or perform again. To lose your younger brother, who was only 18 years old, you know he would trade his entire career and everything he had ever made just to have him back. Coming back to public life after something like that would take a very long time, and it's entirely possible that if Frank was working on another record at the time, it was completely canceled because he just wasn't ready to appear in public again so soon after losing his brother. But it seems like Frank will be coming back to music soon. A few months ago, it was announced that he's going to be headlining Coachella in April of next year, and obviously nothing is confirmed, but I doubt he would pull up to a festival playing songs from a 7-year-old record. Combining that with him clearing his Instagram a few weeks ago, it seems like Frank is finally ready to drop music again. But at the same time, it's been 6 years since his last album, and it truly is anyone's guess if he's finally ready to come back soon or ever come back at all. After so many false starts and rumors in between years of silence, I think even if he does come back, it won't be the same feeling. Not in a bad way, not because he can't top Blonde, because I think Frank Ocean could make a classic album again. The difference this time isn't Frank. It's us, the listeners. As I've gone from a 16-year-old Frank Ocean fan to a 22-year-old Frank Ocean fan, I've watched the place his music holds in my heart change shape from a guiding light through the struggles of adolescence to a reminder of who I once was. Blonde and Frank Ocean's music as a whole is a meditation on acceptance more than anything else. When we're young, we struggle to accept loss, heartbreak, and loneliness. We think, this isn't how things are supposed to be. I don't like this. That is the pain of adolescence. But as we get older, we start to realize that the only way to survive these intense feelings is to embrace them for what they are. They're an inseparable aspect of the human experience. That's what makes Frank Ocean's music so powerful. Blonde is one of the only albums made in our lifetime that's strong and true enough to have lasted this long, and for its lessons to still be revealing themselves this far into the future. It's a reminder that we are not only in the present moment today, but that we also live in yesterday's future and tomorrow's past. What makes human life, which is inseparable from this moment, so precious is its fleeting nature. And not that it doesn't last, but that it never returns again. So where is Frank Ocean anyway? He's right here, and he always will be. And if you like Frank Ocean, I think you'll also really enjoy my exclusive Closer Look series on Nebula. A lot of the time when I work on videos, I have tons of ideas and storytelling and presentation that isn't allowed on YouTube. That's why I post a Closer Look series covering the production, writing, and stories behind my favorite albums only on Nebula. Nebula is an independent platform that I helped create and design without ads and without an algorithm. It's a place for high quality creators to post not only their regular content, but also work on exclusive original projects that would never work on YouTube. There are over 150 amazing channels on Nebula, like FD Signifier, Polyphonic, Wendover Productions, Real Science, and Adam Neely, and many, many more. And honestly, the best way to get Nebula and watch all my exclusive videos is through our bundle with CuriosityStream, which gives you access to both services for less than $15 a year. And CuriosityStream has some really amazing stuff on their platform, which I know a lot of you will enjoy, with thousands of documentaries with topics ranging from music to history to science and tech and many, many more. Anyway, CuriosityStream and Nebula is a great bundle deal. It's one of the best ways to support my work. You get 2 streaming services, both are which of fascinating content that I know you'll enjoy if you're a viewer of the channel, and it's less than $15 a year. You get interesting, high production value videos like my full-length look at the making of Whole Lotta Red and Call Me If You Get Lost, and I get support for my mission of continuing to make the highest quality music documentaries on the entire internet. So if you click the link below, you go directly to the sign up page where you can get CuriosityStream and Nebula for less than $15 for an entire year, or you can go to curiositystream.com/Volksy to support the channel and watch my exclusive series that's only ever going to be available on Nebula. And of course, thank you so much for watching and supporting my work.